Amen. All righty. Well, I pray that all of you had a blessed Holy Week and blessed Easter. I figured in our little discussion time here, I figured we'd talk about two things today. First, I want to talk about Holy Week, just spiritually how your Holy Week went, and because in a sense that's sort of a form of Christian prayer. Very special form, because we do liturgy all the time, but those are really special liturgies that are different than all the other liturgies throughout the year. And so I thought it might be good to talk about them, at least get your thoughts. And then we need to pick up on our homework from last time, which was like 3 weeks ago. I think 3 weeks ago at this point, which was spiritual communion. And practice. So hopefully you've had plenty of time to practice that and have some thoughts on that as well. And then today we'll be introducing our next form of Christian prayer, which is Musica Divina, which has long been one of my favorites. That might be because I have ADHD, but but maybe it'll apply to you as well. But so let's start off with Holy Week. Holy Week, very special week. Always wonderful. A lot of really special liturgies. And sort of the more you go to, especially Triduum, Maundy, Thursday, Good Friday, and Holy Saturday, are envisioned as one single liturgy. In the early church they were. And if you go to each of them, you may notice how each one sort of picks up where the former one left off. And then it all sort of finally crescendos to Easter morning, and it's all just a wonderful thing. So, anyways, I would love to hear about your thoughts and experiences of Holy Week and how it went for you.
Well, this is the first time in centuries that I haven't sung.
Oh,
choir.
Yeah.
So this, I was able in a different way to participate, and maybe I wasn't thinking so much about the music, but especially the Easter Vigil was very dramatic. It was theater.
It is.
It was wonderful theater and thrilling, especially on Saturday night.
Yep.
I mean, Sunday morning was wonderful too, but you begin to be really excited on the Easter Vigil.
Yeah.
And, so I was particularly drawn to that.
All of it is kind of theatrical.
Oh yeah.
Like the whole Triduum is. And it's Christian liturgy just sort of, I think, at its pinnacle in some ways. Because what's really happening there is a reenactment, a symbolic reenactment of the events. And just as we've talked about before with the Eucharist, by participating in the reenactment, it enables you to participate in the original event. And that sort of sacramental mindset is expanded from just the sacrament itself. It's expanded to the whole liturgy, to the whole experience of Holy Week, where you get to wave your palms, you get to be part of Christ's procession into Jerusalem. You're part of the crowd that yells, "Crucify." You're there in the garden with Christ. You're there as he's stripped. That's the stripping of the altar. You're there as he's flagellated. You're there. You're just there for like every single step of the way. You get to really relive the events and be there and be present. And it really is. But that also means that once you get to the Easter, that's why the Easter Vigil is most exciting. Because the whole idea of Easter Vigil is you are there in Hades, in death, waiting as he shows up, and that flame is kindled in the darkness. And you get to experience that whole, the Exodus out of Hades and to Easter. It is really remarkable. It's a remarkable experience.
One of the effects that had on me in such a powerful way was just like building this sense of longing and hope as you led up to Easter Sunday.
Yeah.
And that sense of like that's one of the reasons I think I love the homily so much on Easter Sunday, was because it was that we're longing for this Savior. There's hope in the Savior, but that's the only place it is. And then the joy of Easter's arrival, like with the bells ringing, it's like realizing the true majesty and wonder
Yep.
that is Easter. I felt like was so profound because of that longing and hope.
Yep. That is precisely why, and I mentioned this when I was trying to encourage, every year I'm trying to encourage more and more people to come to the Triduum. And part of the reason is because, sort of like I said on Palm Sunday, your participation in Holy Week will make for a much better Easter, because they're designed to do that very thing. It's like an arrow. The further you pull it back, the further it'll go on the other end. And the more you pull back on Holy Week, the better your experience of Easter is going to be. And I think that this is especially, I think it's especially pronounced if your experience of Easter, I grew up sort of evangelical. We didn't celebrate Lent. There wasn't much at all to Holy Week. And for the most part, all there was to Easter was a very joyous Easter morning, which is all well and good. But what ends up happening is, especially as a kid, what you think Easter ends up being about is bunnies and chocolate and candy and Easter eggs. Because that is your experience of the celebration of it. But when you get this full experience of Holy Week, that's what ends up happening. You get to actually experience your slavery to sin and your helplessness in it, which makes Easter morning all the more joyful, because you get to re-experience that salvation. You get to re-experience just sort of that release and the chains dropping and you're free. It really adds to the experience of the resurrection.
I think one of the things for me was, as you start sinking deeper into it, when you think about walking up in the mind and spirit with Christ on this path, and then you do this, experience to the best of your ability of his pain and his sacrifice, and then him going and kicking down the walls of Hades and coming out on the other side of it. Two things for me that become almost more difficult. A is coming out of it on the other end, and then you're back in this world and go, oh, seriously? Okay, I'm like, I gotta live here still? Okay, so yeah, it's like this tremendous letdown afterwards, because you're back to the mundane.
Yeah.
And it creates a much deeper ache for being where he is.
That's not a bad thing.
No, it's not, but it's like, come on, can you hurry up?
It is.
Back? Like, come on.
Well, St. Paul talks a lot about how we are exiles.
Yeah.
You need a kick in the butt as a Christian if you're feeling comfortable in this world. And I think that is one of those things that Easter's good for. It helps us to realize that we're not a part of it. This is not our world anymore. We're not citizens here. We're citizens in heaven, and we're here in exile, and we're here to take as many people with us as we can. And we are to be lights in a dark world, little Christs. And so that is that is part of the experience, I think, of Easter, and it's a good thing. Hold on to that, because we should feel like exiles. What you said also reminds me of another thing, though, which is somewhat related. And that is, in this switch in spiritualities that takes place, Lent is a very ascetical spirituality. So it's focused on sort of like self-discipline, self-control, self-mastery. And you are, in Lent, you're exerting your will above your passions more intensely than you usually are. And then you go from this extended fast period suddenly to a feast period, which intentionally sort of takes all the restraining belts off, and you just sort of celebrate. That's good and that's wonderful. What often ends up happening, though, and you have to be careful about this spiritually, is your will by that point is kind of exhausted. So you may be, really thrilled about how much you've gotten certain sins or passions or vices under control throughout Lent. And then suddenly you get to Easter and you have this wonderful celebration and you start eating chocolate again and whatnot. But then all of those old vices come back with a vengeance. And you find yourself, the demons come back 7 more than they were in the first place, like Jesus said. Excuse me, still getting over that cold. But you've got to be really careful about that. That can really hit you if you aren't anticipating it. But once you've anticipated it, you can sort of be ready for it. But you always have to be careful about those vices trying to come back on the other side of Lent. Any other thoughts on your experience of Easter, of Holy Week? Good. Well then, I'm glad all of you had a good one. This is a good place to celebrate it. We really go all the way in with it. But I would encourage you, make it a yearly thing every year. Really put your back into Lent. Put your back into Holy Week, and just experience a little bit of heaven.
Just that it was we were running from Satan, and I love the liturgy helped me get traction, so that I could pivot, and I felt like we were all called to battle.
Yeah.
So that we're deployed.
Yep.
So that we're not just languishing.
Yep.
I was just thinking, kind of to your point, Charlie, the kind of let down or sorrow after the big celebration of Easter is kind of it's the Eucharist kind of serves like a little Easter every week.
It does.
Like that every week coming to that table and receiving Christ, and having that. I don't know, it sort of made me think about the wonder and the joy that I felt on Easter, how to then live in that reality throughout the year. And it seems like the Eucharist is one of those pivotal places to do that. I don't know if I was good at
It is. And Easter and Sunday always is an Easter. It is always a celebration of the resurrection. Sunday is never a fast day.
This Saturday night prayer is preparing us for the Paschal feast.
It is. You relive, so the rhythm of Holy Week, you put into, you get extra intense for the actual Holy Week itself. But we as Christians are intended to sort of relive the drama of Holy Week every single week. And that's why, generally throughout the year, we're supposed to fast on Fridays and feast on Sundays, because you are reliving that Holy Week cycle on a weekly basis. I would love to comment, though, a little bit about the whole that whole attempt to sort of try and hold on to the excitement.
Not the excitement so much, but the joy.
The joy. I'm glad you say joy, because joy and excitement are two very different things. But it is tempting to want to do that. But that's not the way human life is. We're not intended to be always and perpetually at a climax. Unless you have this sort of thing going on, this sort of thing gets old. And it's just a natural part of life to sort of, every Easter has its Good Friday, and every Good Friday has its Easter. And that's not a bad thing. And don't run away from the dips. Use the dips, because they have a really important function in your spiritual life. So what's best there is sort of the embrace of the whole process and understanding where you are in it, instead of just always trying to chase sort of the high points. I think the better you understand that process, the less likely you are to get stuck at this point, at the low point. That is always a danger. We tend to get so, as I think all humans are probably this way, we just get stuck in the moment. And then we think that this moment is forever. And that's just never the way it is. So the more that you understand that all of life is this thing, the more when you get down here, you can anticipate and know that you're going to end up here. All of the downs always turn into ups. You never get stuck in a down. And it's really not this, it's more this is what it is. And every time you go down, there's another up on the other side. Don't get too stuck in it. Don't get depressed. Anticipate the good. Anticipate the Easter. Let every Good Friday be filled with the anticipation of Easter, because it's on its way. That's one of the lessons of the resurrection. The whole idea of the resurrection of Christ can be generalized to all of life. It's not a thing that's stuck and happened in the past. It's a pattern that manifests itself in the Christian life on a regular basis. So all of your little crosses in life will have their empty graves, and it's just a matter of learning how to lean into that process and hope in the resurrection. Hope and joy are closely related. The highest joys will come after you've held on to your hope all the way through the cross into the resurrection. And so, and like I said, this is just a pattern of Christian life and a pattern of Christian spirituality. And it's just a matter of understanding it, knowing it, and living into it.
Just one quick question. It's like, for me, I understand what you talk about, the up and down, but the thing is, you're also climbing a ladder or a hill, whatever you want to do.
Stick with ladder. That's a good, very traditional Christian spiritual image.
But the problem is you're also exerting energy in doing that, and eventually you reach a point of being depleted or exhausted of some sort. Is there anything you can say in the midst of that would allow to have some external source to say, keep going? I mean, I get the hope, the focus.
Yep.
But it's the spiritual energy.
We can stick with the image of the Christian week. That's what a Sabbath rest is for.
What?
Sabbath rest. So all vices are extremes. All virtues are means. The virtue is the mean between extremes. The classical example of this that goes all the way back to Aristotle is courage. Courage is not an extreme. Courage is the mean between the extremes of cowardice and foolhardiness. Courage can easily become just complete stupidity. So you need the middle ground. But if we were to apply this to what you're saying right here, there's a vice of sloth, and the opposite of sloth is not working hard. There's sloth, and there's workaholism, or the vice would be assiduousness. So those are the two extremes. The virtue comes in the middle with moderation. And so it's your growth in virtue to learn how to go through this without getting exhausted. And the way you do that is by intentionally planning rest. Especially, New England is terrible at this. It's got this whole Puritan thing going on for the past 300 years, which is just dreadful. And there's this whole thing with industriousness, and what it's turned into is just you never take a break. New England is constantly on. You're supposed to answer emails at 2 a.m, and just the expectations are absolutely insane. And if you want to find the virtue to that vice, it's by pulling back the reins and setting up some boundaries. And so you have to take care of yourself. And part of the way you do that is a command from God, which is rest. That could be literally protecting the seventh day, Saturdays, or it can also manifest itself in other ways. I know that in my life, I stick with the daily offices of praying every 3 hours throughout the day. So every 3 hours, I get a very intentional little break, put things away, focus on the Lord for a minute, and get that moment of renewal. I'm very strict about when I'm off the clock, I'm off the clock. When this collar comes out, I belong to my family. And I've created just little rules like that. And if you look at the church calendar, it does this intentionally, not just with Sabbaths, but for instance, in the middle of each of the penitential seasons, we have a rose Sunday, a pink day, a day for rest and rejoicing in the midst of penance. So there's a lot of wisdom to this. And growth in Christian prayer and spirituality isn't just about prayer and spirituality. All of these things are supposed to lend towards growth and virtue. And that's why the spiritual examine is so important, because if you look at yourself and you're getting exhausted from all of these things, even just the stuff that life throws at you, there's probably a vice and virtue issue there. That's the thing that you confess, and that's the thing that you start creatively thinking about and saying, how can I adjust this in such a way as to produce the virtue? There's a lot of hands up, and you were first.
I was just thinking that I resonated a little bit with what Charlie said, which is that sometimes like the cycle itself feels exhausting. Yeah, sometimes I feel like the cycle itself spiritually feels exhausting, and I think Sabbath rest is the same. I guess the thing that I try to contemplate in that moment is the phrase "it is finished." Is a really powerful thing to contemplate, to remember that like he rests from his labor and he rests from his salvific labor, and he's given me rest in that. And so it is finished, like nothing that I do can add to what Christ has done in like a world-changing way, the way that it is finished. You know, that tetelestai is it is finished, you know? And so I think that is the reassurance that sometimes I need to remember that like I am meant to rest in that knowledge.
Yep. Terry?
I have the converse problem. I have trouble extricating myself from rest.
Yeah.
I mean, I was wrestling with these thoughts as I was walking to my car.
Uh-huh.
Oh, goodness. Everything's such an effort. Even getting to the car. I'm feeling this way.
Yeah.
It's exhausting.
Yeah.
Trying to even extricate yourself from resting.
Yep. Yeah, that's and that would be called sloth. An interesting thing is this. So we just mentioned how vice are two extremes, and the virtue is in the middle. There's a point at which sort of they connect in a circle. So if the result of overwork, of assiduousness, will turn into sloth, because you've put it in so hard that you now have nothing left. And there are also, this could turn into a whole class, so I got to be careful here. We still got other homework to get to, and also introduce a new form of prayer. But it may be good for us to meet. But before you can get back to the mean between the extremes, you need to get all the rest out first. So rest isn't necessarily a bad thing, but you can get stuck in it. So
There's rest of the body and there's rest of the mind.
and of the soul. Those are all three different things, and they all require a different form of rest. And they all are also related to others. So sometimes you can rest your soul, but your body also needs it. So that may be a good sort of thing to like sit down with the spiritual director and sort of so you can get down into the nitty-gritty and work through the details and figure out what's what, and what needs to happen with what. So let's switch over real quick to your actual homework from 3 weeks ago, which was the prayer of spiritual communion, which I think is an interesting one. Did anyone get a chance to practice it? And if so, what was your experience? And did you have any struggles? Or has it been too long ago?
It's just that we were at church all the time. There was no church. We were always at church, so there's no chance to be away from it.
Yeah, I think what I anticipated happened, which was, at the just falling asleep eventually.
Oh. Sure.
Trying to,
Yep.
do all the things to sort of settle yourself, and then all
Yep.
of a sudden you're wiped out.
Yep. And we've talked about that many times. Yep. Any other thoughts or comments on spiritual communion? So for myself, at least, I can share some of my own thoughts on it. It's been a fruitful practice for myself. Abby, you talked about trying to hold on to that sort of Easter thing. That's just one way to do it. If I had the chance, I'm a church nerd. I love church. I would go to church every day. I'd go to mass every day if I had the chance, if we offered it. But that's not always possible. And this is just sort of a way. It's really interesting to realize that the liturgy of the Mass itself tells a spiritual story and gives you a spiritual experience from beginning to end. It's sort of a story that you get into and act it out as an actor within the play, all the way to the end. And that it's wonderful to me that there is actually a way to sort of step into it at any point, at any moment, that you can go through the steps that are the Mass. And you can be part of that story and make it your own story. There is only one liturgy, and that is the heavenly liturgy. And all of our individual liturgies on Sunday morning participate in that one liturgy. And I think that through saying a spiritual communion, you can tap into that one heavenly liturgy. You can just sort of, it's like it's taking place in the other room. And anytime you want to, you can just sort of walk into heaven and just, and there's a wonderful part in that spiritual communion prayer. Once you actually get to the spiritual communion part, I unite myself to you together with all your faithful gathered around every altar of your church. What a wonderful line that sort of captures the essence of what the spiritual communion is all about. And the more that you practice Christian spirituality, I think the more that you realize that your spirit is able to sort of wander in this vast sort of spiritual landscape, and can sort of go places. And you may be having a busy day or be stuck at home, but your spirit can participate in that heavenly liturgy. And I think that's a remarkable thing. Charlie?
Father Samuel has been taking some of us through this book called Moral Reflections on the Book of Job.
St. Gregory.
St. Gregory.
It's on my reading list, but it's so long.
It is very long, and as who has grown up in sort of more modern, it's extremely difficult to read because of the fact that he comes up with all of these analogies that are,
Yep.
how did you get there? Very difficult. However, there's one that he talked about in this most recent book called Entering into the Tomb. And my first one was like, oh, you mean we're whitewashed on the outside and dead bones on the inside, that kind of tomb? And it's like, no, it's exactly the opposite. It's like a place that you, just like you said, kind of where you can go, that's set up an area in your mind to which you can go into.
Yep.
That is separate from kind of the basic logical world that you're in right now. And I've sort of been kind of mess with that idea, kind of what you're talking about, that you can go there at any point
Yes.
and visit. Then you got to leave and go out again.
You never
Back here again.
you never leave. You never leave. You never leave. You're there. Your body's in a physical realm and your spirit's in a spiritual realm. You're just not a. You're just not. We just haven't developed the discipline to know where our spirit is all the time. And that's the beauty of for myself. If we go back to a lot of the contemplative prayers that we learned, once you've sort of once you've been thoroughly introduced, let's say, to that feeling of being in God's presence, it's easier to get there. The idea is that you are able to hold your spirit in that state while you go throughout your daily work. But that doesn't happen unless you spend the hard, difficult time of being quieting everything down and being with God. But once you've done all of that hard work and you can hold on to that, you can hold on to it while you're doing all this other stuff. And that relates back to your whole thing on rest. If you can learn how to hold your soul in a state of rest in God's presence, that makes all the other physical stuff that you've got to do much more bearable, in a sense.
Didn't you say that's what the martyrs had to do?
Yeah, I guess you could say that. Yeah, one last time. but we're all martyrs. That's one of the lessons of Christmas. After Christmas, you have the three martyrs, the three types of martyrdom. But I don't have time to get into that right now because we've got Musica Divina to introduce in 5 minutes. So I always find myself in these situations. I only have 5 minutes left to finish something. But so Musica Divina is a wonderful method of meditation. St. Augustine said that he who sings his prayers prays twice. You may notice that a lot of our liturgies are sung, and that's intentional. Singing has there's something really divine, I think, about song, and about its ability to move us, and to sort of excite different aspects of our brain. When you sing, you can be using your rational side, but then also that irrational side, and they both kind of end up working together, and you can get places through song that you can't get by other means. And music also has a way of sort of moving us emotionally and helping us to participate in a reality emotionally as well. There have been a lot of studies done as well of choirs. When they sing together, their hearts will actually beat in rhythm together. Their hearts synchronize. Isn't that cool? That's remarkable. And those of you who have sung in choirs know how much of a bonding experience that can be, and especially how moving it can be to be in the midst of the music and participating in it, and not just an observer. That can be such a powerful experience. And so music has always been used for a long time in Christian spirituality, and it's a good thing to learn to harness. So I think that evangelicals and charismatics are especially good at this, especially at making it accessible. When I was a younger Christian, and well, just younger, I was very charismatic musical prayer with my guitar down in my bedroom alone at night became one of the first vehicles for me of contemplative prayer, and of really sort of being able to break through into sort of the that contemplative space, and it's such a wonderful method of prayer. So, but that's kind of the beauty of it is that you can it really sort of moves both mind, body, and soul simultaneously, and allows you to just sort of get whole person involvement in your prayers. And so I would love to have you just sort of play around with this one. And I think that my introduction to it will primarily be through your homework, okay? Through your practices. So if you are a musical person, you may not be. This is not just for musical people. There are a couple of ways to practice this. First of all, if you're musical, do something musical. If you play piano, play something that's specifically spiritual this week. Practice it. Try to internalize it. Get to a point of memorization with it, where you can just sort of let the flow state flow. You know, that's a very spiritual experience, just letting the flow state flow. And if you can do that, like in a choir, for instance, with a group of people, that's a wonderful spiritual state to be in. If you are not a musical person, what I would encourage you to do, and you can also do this if you are a musical person, I do this quite often, is use recorded music. So either you can get to a place alone by yourself where you just sort of sing the praises and let it all go. That's sort of the more charismatic side of it. Or you can let it be a soundtrack to your life. This is what I do a lot now. You can use the music to help guide your mental and spiritual state. I have playlists of the whole English hymnal is online, which is wonderful. So we could do our English, our Anglican hymns, and I have it separated into each liturgical season. So each liturgical season, I just sort of immerse myself in the hymnody of our tradition. And I do this while I'm at work. So, I'm sitting there typing, but I've got, all the hymns just sort of going. And you can do this not only with that, but also with classical music, I think, with Gregorian chant. All of these things are really wonderful at sort of helping to, develop a spiritual awareness. And in that way, at least, while you're physically doing your work, there's sort of another level of you that's also participating in a higher reality. And it can be a really wonderful way of just sort of helping to govern that sort of low-level, underlying spiritual state right underneath there. And it's something that, now, this is why earlier I said this might be just because I'm ADHD. If you have ADHD, you're probably used to having like several layers of thoughts happening simultaneously. They all want to take you in different directions. And so sometimes it's just, I talked a little earlier on in this class about how sometimes you just have to give the kids chores so you can do your work. For an ADHD mind, that's what the music does. I get the kids, chores so I can do my work. But it can do the same thing for you as well. So anyways, that's what I'd like for you to try out. If you're a musical person, you can put a little more weight into this. If not, just use some Christian music, whether that's contemporary Christian music or hymns, Gregorian chant, classical music. All of those things are really great methods for sort of helping to bring mental and spiritual focus. And the idea is that you're doing this while you're doing other things throughout life. It just sort of creates another underlying, spiritual movement. So it is very motivational. It'll help you clean the house. So that's your homework, and we'll talk about it next week. Thank you, everybody.